Hey, Barbell Logic listeners, what you're about to hear is one of a few episodes I recorded with my original co-host, Scott Hambrick. His life and lifting have changed a lot since you last heard him on the podcast. And in these episodes, we discussed what's changed and just catch up. And we also talk about lifting. Now, an important reminder that these podcasts are for entertainment purposes only. Scott's opinions are not necessarily the opinions of Barbell Logic or myself, but it makes for some pretty damn entertaining conversations. So Scott and I touch on cultural and political stuff that we don't normally touch on in the podcast. So if you don't want to hear that stuff, it's totally fine. We'll return to our normal podcast for barbell enthusiasts and coaches in just a couple weeks. If you've missed Scott on the podcast, I'm happy to bring this to you. I'm really proud of the podcast we recorded together, and I'm excited to have him back on the podcast for a few episodes. You can always listen to some of the older podcasts with Scott that are out in individual episodes or re-released in the series. If you want to just hear Scott, you can check out one of his podcasts, the Online Great Books podcast, the Music and Ideas podcast, and his new one, the Growing Resilience podcast, links for which you can find in the show notes. Hope you all enjoy the shows. You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Barbell Logic podcast. I'm Matt Reynolds. I'm here again with Scott Hambrick. This is a bonus episode, I think. I don't really.
What does that mean? They don't pay for this shit
I
anyway.
don't control the podcast anymore. You're confused about how this works. They just use me. I don't get paid for this.
Right. Big pod.
Big pod,
Getting rich
couple
off Big
100,000
Pod.
downloads. You and I built the foundation, and they just take it from us. Don't pay me $1. So we're in your barn, farmhouse. Who is that person on the wall? Is that your daughter?
Yeah, that's Riles.
Is that like a senior picture?
Mhm.
That's crazy. That's a nice picture of her. She's got a cowboy hat on, looking like farm girl. So we're in your
Perfect genetics.
Excellent genetics.
High IQ.
Mostly from your wife. Let's be honest. I mean, yeah, high IQ from you, but she got the looks from Charity.
Looks come and go. IQ's forever, brother.
That's probably true. Unless you get Alzheimer's or
Then you don't care.
one of those things. So we recorded a couple podcasts you guys have probably listened to already out under the shade tree, looking out over your farm. We're in the barn now, the pole barn. We've just had dinner. We're going to do an episode. When we recorded the previous podcast, I was recording the video on my phone, and I had notes on my phone of stories I wanted to tell you that I haven't got to share with you the last few weeks. So over the last few weeks, every time I thought of a story about a person or funny story, anecdote. This is an anecdote podcast. My goal was for it to be 30 minutes. It'll probably be an hour and a half.
Yeah, quit trying to control me.
That's the way it works. Well, I'm not trying to control you, but I wanted to tell you. So I have these stories to tell you. So anecdotes, which if I understand correctly, if I get an anecdote is just a story about a kind of a funny, interesting story about a real person. Is that true?
I don't know.
I mean, how would you describe the word anecdote? When you think of that word, how would you?
It's a short little humorous snippet of conversation.
But it's
I don't
usually about a person, I think.
know. I don't have it that way. But,
Okay,
but
you
maybe.
look
but
it
maybe.
up. Let's see. Maybe you're right and I'm wrong. I have no idea.
I don't know. I don't think about it much.
Looking up anecdotes. Here we go.
Lay one on me. I mean, this is terrible pod.
So let me tell you a story. Kinsley plays softball now, my youngest. And she's in a homeschool softball league. I see your eyes bugging out. Not the way you're thinking. This is
It's softball.
No, it's not. It's
homeschool softball, so it's homely girls
it is
kissing.
Okay, I'm not going to. No, that's not true. But she's not bad. She's not bad at softball player. They're not a great team. They were terrible last year.
Yeah.
A little better this year. Last year, my mom would come to some of the games. My dad passed a few months ago. Mom doing great.
Good.
I don't know. I feel like she's like best she's ever been. It's just.
Well,
I don't think she's going to
he was
date
ill for
or
so
marry.
long,
Yeah,
Matt.
He was sick for a long time. I don't think my mom needs another human being to
You need a
to
new
love
daddy.
her. I do not need a new daddy.
I got just the guy.
Is it you? Because I would.
Spankings. We're going to start with that.
You get a good paddle. I don't, I need to look for the, I bet the paddle's in my parents' garage. My dad made that paddle, and then my brother and I had to sand it and stain it because you didn't want the splinters, Anyway, so last year, Kinsley is her first year playing. So she's 12 now. She was 11 or even maybe 10 at the beginning of the season then. Not a good team. Not a good team. And the parents don't care that much about homeschool. Nobody cares who wins. We're looking for action, right? You just want, have some fun, hit the ball. I'm a very competitive person. I want winners and losers and whatnot, but big surprise for you, huh? And so, but in this, it's the first year, we're just looking for, let's just have a good time. So Kinsley plays first base, and she's not a bad first baseman, and it's a fair amount of action for this.
It's a great job.
Because when you're that age, every ball that's hit, even if the runner is absolutely guaranteed to be safe, they tell a shortstop, third baseman, whatever, you throw it to first no matter what. Even if the runner beat you out by 60 seconds,
right.
You're still throwing it to first. So she gets a lot of errant balls. So we got some action for Kinsley. And so in retrospect, I think this was one of the last games of the season, if not the last game of the season. So our team was on defense. Kinsley's on first base. The other team is batting. And they hit 4 or 5 in a row, sort of dribblers up the infield in the middle, first base, shortstop, second base, pitcher. And Kinsley's team, again, I believe 100% of the girls on Kinsley's team last year had never played softball before. This is their very first year. And nobody would go get it. So Kinsley has learned when the ball is struck, she just goes running to first base and waiting for the throw.
That's her job.
Unless the ball is dribbled up first base, unless the ball is dribbled up first baseline, at which point she needs to go get the ball. So we had a couple of those, and one the pitcher could have gotten one. So I was getting frustrated because, the ball was literally, it would just roll between the pitcher and first base and would just stop, and no one would get it. And so my mom's sitting next to me. I'm sitting there with Rachel, and at one point I yell. I think I've told some of this story on the podcast, but the important part of the story is the second part, which I go, I'm like, girls, go get the ball. Aggressively pursue the ball. That's what I say. That's it. Don't cuss at them. Don't really, only yell to enough to get my voice to carry. And there's 2 outs. They get the third out. My mom kind of huffs and puffs when I do it. She's sitting next to me. She's insufferable.
Beyond
like
the
your
pale.
mom. She's very similar, sort of. No, not interested in any of this sort of, testosterone-filled manhood stuff. And so I yell. So my mom kind of huffs and puffs, and we're all sitting in lawn chairs. And the inning gets over. They get the third out, and Kinsley runs off the field. And rather than running to the dugout, she runs around the visitors' dugout and runs to Rachel and cries and says, "Dad embarrassed me. I don't think I can go on," so on and so forth. And so of course, I'm just trying to diffuse the situation. I apologize profusely. I'm like, "Hey, I was just trying to get you guys to get the ball. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to yell. I wasn't mad at you at all. I was just trying to make sure you heard me," whatever. And so, again, when I was 11 or 12, it's a completely different deal. We were good at baseball. Our parents were yelling.
You destroyed your relationship with your child.
I basically destroyed my relationship with my child. But more importantly, I destroyed my relationship with my mom. And so this season, they played softball. So now we've got a whole nother season. They're significantly better. Kinsley's much better. She's practiced a lot. She's gone through a lot of puberty. She looks like an adult. She's a good first baseman. She's an excellent hitter. I don't know if she got out the single time in the season, maybe once or twice. Hits, doubles, triples. Great, really good player. And the last game of the season, this is 2 weeks ago, I text my mom. I'm like, "Hey, you haven't seen a game this year. Do you want to come see Kinsley? We're out, a little suburb of town, on mom's side of town, on the northeast side." And I said, "They're a lot better than they were last year, Mom." And she says, "Well, the question, son, is, are you better than you were last year?" I said, "Excuse me?" She's like, "Well, do you think you can behave yourself this year?" And I said, "Mom, yes." And I apologize profusely for what I said. I wasn't angry when I said it. I was just, in the midst of competitive sort of action. And I'm sorry, but I do want to make sure that I give you credit for the ability to hold a grudge for an entire year.
Right.
Great job.
Yeah.
And I mean that. She, for the last year, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, Mother's Day, Father's Day, no hugs, no "I love you, son," no nothing.
Right.
She was furiously mad.
So you wrote it down to her husband of 75 decades is passing away.
Has died. My dad has died. My mom is grieving.
Right. Oh,
and
no.
I taught now.
Oh,
and,
no.
and here's the thing: when my dad died, and remember, we had my dad's memorial a month or 6 weeks after he died. Our family has kind of done that, so you don't have to. You can kind of deal with all the the practical things, and you can like focus on the memorial a little later. And my brother, who's close to me, lives in Boston, and my sister, who's close to me, she lives in town. She works for me and stuff. And I'm like, Mom is just so you just can't. And like, we don't understand that at all. Like, Mom is the most loving human. She's always loved us like crazy. Like, Mom just doesn't like you.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I get. Dad liked me, and they're like, we don't. Dad didn't like us, and it never hit me before. My dad liked me, and my mom doesn't, and my brother and sister the other way around. So yeah, my mom has held a grudge for an entire year.
So
for
you're like,
yelling at my daughter in a softball game.
So you're like, I'm an orphan, but you guys aren't.
Right. That's right. That's right. I'm looking for an adoption. So that's my mom. So anecdote number 1, my mom has the ability to hold a grudge for an entire year over a softball game.
That's just getting warmed up.
Just ice just starting. Okay.
Yeah.
What do you got for me?
God, I don't know. But this whiskey you're drinking,
Willet,
it's this Willet Special Reserve, and it's the
funny bottle.
It's the stupid bottle.
Looks like a distill.
A pot still. And they call this one. This would be called a handle because it's
handle.
the 1.75 milliliter thing or liter. So you and I were scheduled to go to Wichita Falls one time. And Austin Brackey called me. He says, I'm at the liquor store.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And they've got some stuff that you might want.
Yeah.
And I said, what is it? And he texted me a picture, and it was these.
Yeah.
And I thought they were the little ones. Because everything on the shelf,
He didn't hold the dollar bill. He didn't hold the dollar bill
bottles.
next to it or anything. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was a good price.
They were all 175s.
Yeah. It was a price good enough that I thought, if this is the 750, it's all right.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll take all of them.
Yeah.
So we show up at what is that crappy hotel? Whatever it is.
Was it the Days Inn or the other? Yeah, it's one of the Days Inn. And then the other one's, what was that called?
It's the Beaumont.
Yeah, whatever it was.
So anyway, we show up and he's like, I got your stuff, you know. And I go up there and there's cases of these giant bottles.
You got 10 liters of Willet.
14 liters? I don't even know. I thought they were the little ones. And I was like, thanks, Austin. I didn't know. Well, so here's another Austin Brackey story. We were in Oakland.
I remember, at the Nationals. I remember this.
It was me and him and Nikki.
By the way, hold on. I just want everybody to just take about 5 seconds and think about Scott Hambrick in Oakland, California.
It was not my favorite time.
Dude, this couldn't be a worse city for you to be in.
There's worse.
Is there?
Well, yeah.
Portland?
Detroit?
Memphis? Dude, Detroit's way better than Oakland.
You think so?
Have you been there lately?
No.
It's way better than Oakland.
Okay.
They've had
I'll take it.
Detroit gave away all their downtown cities to all the tech hubs. It's like been gentrified. Oakland's a shithole.
Oakland's a shithole.
Portland, shithole.
We were back there, and I was there. It was me and Nikki and Austin and somebody else. And they were going to go weigh in. And so I told Austin, he's like, well, what do you weigh? What do you weigh right now? And I'm like, with an erection or without? And he short-circuited. He's like, ugh. And I'm like, because I'm much heavier.
You gag with erection or without?
Well, he didn't know what to say.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm 7 or 8 pounds heavier with
an erection.
Right. And then he just busted up and he was just like hyperventilating. And he's like, that can't be. Like, he's a doctor, right? And that can't be. Like, it's a joke, but he can't go there. And I'm like, yeah, it fills up with like dark matter. And then like it has gravity, and then like stuff starts, like the tides change. And he's like, what is wrong with you?
Who was that? That was 17, I think, right?
Something like that.
I think it was January 17. That's a long time ago.
He got so tickled that it pleased me.
So I think I mentioned this maybe on the last episode, but so we've planted a church from our old church. So we haven't split off from our old church, but we split off, but in a healthy way.
The minor schism.
Yeah, minor schism. And my pastor, who was a pastor at the old church, we did a kind of group camping trip. And by camping means I stay in the air conditioned cabin and everybody else stays in tents. And we had kind of a sunrise service at church on Sunday. This is literally last weekend. And when the church service was over, most people went home, but the pastor and his wife and one of their family stayed, went down the river. We got access to the river, swim in the river. And I got to talking a little somehow about the podcast or something. And my pastor said, you know, you don't know this, but the first time I didn't know you at all, but I heard about Barbell Logic and the podcast. He's like, I looked it up and I listened to an episode, and he said, you sang R. Kelly in the first minute.
Right.
And he said, I knew you were going to be okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, I knew you'd be fine. And I got to thinking that, you know, the only person I've ever sung on the podcast just got 30 years in prison. And so, did you know that? Did you know he got sentenced? Yeah. So, you know, so look out. If you're an artist, I mean.
Or if you're in prison, you don't get ready to get peed on, you know?
That's right. Only if you're a 14-year-old girl, evidently. So, yeah, guy's got a problem, you know. I mean, here's the deal. Historical, we didn't know. I didn't know.
Oh, bull.
Listen.
Chappelle had already had the skit on there.
Pee on you.
No, everybody
so
there.
Good. It's so good. I mean, it's the music from my childhood. But I'm looking for my next song to sing. It may be a telltale sign of who's going to prison next.
Like, who's the worst? You need, like, The Who. Because, like, Pete Townsend's, like, a terrible pedophile.
I'm not a fan of The Who either.
Nobody
we agree
is.
on this.
Nobody is.
You know, I don't like the Rolling Stones either.
I like a little bit of that.
Okay.
I'm not a worshiper, but it's all right.
I mean, you know, you'll hear like Beatles. I'll take the Beatles all day over Rolling Stones. A lot of people don't, but yeah, that's me. That's fine. That's good.
You're saying this guy found out about you through the podcast.
Yeah. My pastor, by the way.
Right.
Who listened to the only episode he's ever listened to was the one where I sang Your Body's Calling by R. Kelly on the podcast. And he told me that's how I knew you would be okay. I knew you weren't going to be high maintenance. You were going to be okay when you sang R. Kelly. That's right. So it's like, and he's true. You would say I am high maintenance.
I went to high school with this guy, and you like
R. Kelly?
No, Bill was his name. And you go to the bathroom, you know, they ring the bell, and you got to go in there, and everybody's got to line up the urinal because it's school and it's like a penitentiary, whatever. So they got the divider between the urinals, you know. Yes. He would like pee on your foot.
Not okay.
Not R. Kelly, but he would pee on your foot.
From the come and go McDonald's over the highway between Tulsa and Springfield.
Yeah,
I went and peed, and the guy straight up focused laser beamed on my penis. There I was in all my glory, 1 3/4, and the guy was just.
Did it get heavier?
Staring a hole right through my penis into my prostate. It was uncomfortable for me. How hard is it to have a divider?
I don't know.
Evidently hard.
I don't know.
So this
I graduated from high school 30 years ago.
30 years ago.
30 years ago.
Yeah, I'm 25.
So if you look me up on the internet, it ain't hard to find me. I got scotthambrick.com.
Sure. The new Scott Hambrick.
There's 1,200. There's no new one.
There's nothing. Well, I mean, just mean there's nothing from 92.
No, but like I can be found.
Sure, of course.
Scott at scotthambrick.com is my email. There's 12,000 hours of different podcasts. Like
right.
I can be found.
Sure.
So I was talking to Charity, and I was like, I wonder when they're going to have our class reunion. I'm not going to go. No hard feelings. I'm just not going to go.
Same.
You know,
right.
There are 80 kids in my class. Best of luck. I'm not going to go. So then my uncle comes over, and he's like, did you go to your class reunion? It was last weekend.
I never told you?
Right. It was
never heard about it.
No, it was at the Hard Rock over there.
Like,
you know?
literally 15 minutes away.
Yeah.
No dice.
Yeah, yeah. Charity's on Facebook, you know.
That's funny.
Right. No.
I'm at 25 years. The one thing we were talking about on the previous podcast about Gen X, and I love Gen X. That's our generation, obviously. So it's, you know, I get it. I'm a little bit biased.
They got problems.
They do have problems.
Super cynical.
So yes, for sure. And a little bit in like super apathetic with it, right? And so
they learned helplessness being the children of baby boomers.
Yeah, that's right. And so I don't expect, as a fallout of that, my 25th anniversary should be this summer, and there's been no talk. 25 is typically a big one. That's typically one of the bigger ones you have, and I don't think we're going to have it. So my wife, I'll tell you a story about my wife. So I don't know if your wife does this. 2 stories about my wife I wrote. One, I need you to get out of Scott living in barn mode for a minute. Did your wife at the old house, we're actually sitting at the old dining room table right now. Did she like putting placemats under plates?
No.
Okay. So my wife loves placemats, and she updates those by season.
Oh, of course.
So patriotic ones for July 4th.
Get your turkey ones.
Turkey, you know, fall, spring, summer, Christmas, all this stuff. The problem is that she gets furious if you get anything on the placemat. So the placemat is under all the plates, but if you go and you get your steak and we do a lot of roasted potatoes and beets, if you get beet juice on the placemat, she's furious. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't you just pull up the placemats before we eat dinner? Because the placemats are here to be, you know,
to make it fun.
I don't know. And specifically, she's mad at me, and I'm the worst. And so I thought a placemat was there to protect the table, protect the wood.
Well, that's true.
Not to protect the placemat. She would like you to have a plate, and then the placemat is there to say, ho, 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 hold on. You be very careful about the food you eat and make sure that you don't get any of this food on the placemat. The placemat is actually a thing we're protecting, not the table. I mean, the table, you've seen our dining room table, it's a 150-year-old barnwood it's got heavy coats of polyurethane. Nothing's going to happen to the table. Placemat will get stained with beet juice. Not interested in that. So when I go to eat, I'll start to eat and I'll start eating my meal with spaghetti sauce.
Mm-hmm.
And she'll pick up my plate and she'll pull the placemat out from underneath me. And she's
I
like,
would flip my plate over on the placemat.
Infuriating. It's infuriating. The placemat is made to be.
I feel the same way about pillows. Throw pillows,
right.
You know, that they'll make the bed.
All the
There's
extra
42
shit.
pillows on there.
It's ridiculous.
I need 1.3 pillows.
Right. I need 2, but okay. Or I've got a great, you know what? I should write this down. I got a pillow that should sponsor the podcast.
Oh my God.
We finally found the world. I don't even know the name of it. I'm going to talk about it on another podcast. I'm going to have to look it up. It is the best. We've tried all these pillows. What's that the right-wing guy that has a My Pillow?
Mike.
Awful pillows.
I got a buckwheat pillow. I dig.
You, Mike Pillow.
Mike Lindell,
your pillows suck, but I'll tell you the pillows are good, but not on this episode because I don't remember.
Well, what's the construction method? What is it?
Well, so I think it's memory foam, little chunks of memory foam that's in it that's really full. And so I want a pillow that is big, but also holds its shape.
You need a firm My Pillow.
I have My Pillows, but they're not firm enough and they're not big enough. And so eventually my head creeps down and
it's that Charlie Brown head. I mean, you need a piece of firewood to put it on so it doesn't get flat. It's too heavy.
Just because I don't have any hair and I got a big skull?
No, it's just a big old head.
So it is. So another thing funny about my wife, I was noticing the other day is my wife, who is, most people are relatively familiar with Rachel, and you are familiar with her. She's a pretty proper lady. She's a nice looking lady. She's well kempt. Well kempt? Is that the word? Kempt?
Kempt, yeah.
With an M. She looks nice. She loves farts. She loves them so much.
She's going to love this show.
She thinks they are so funny. It doesn't matter who you are, what you're. If you're a tiny little baby and you fart in your diaper, or you're a 7-year-old kid and you fart, or you're a 60-year-old person and you fart. Sybil farted the other. I probably shouldn't tell us. She farted. She did a set of squats of 10. She farted 7 times on her squat. 7 out of 10 of her reps. She farted.
RPE 7.
Didn't care at all. She's like, oh, that happens with, when you get old, that happens.
Right. She
just blew it off. Rachel had to walk out of the room. She's like a junior high kid. She says, farts are like snowflakes. They're never the same. They're always new, always fun, always exciting. My beautiful, lovely wife loves farts from everybody.
Well, she's in luck because
I've
stayed with you. No, I've stayed with you. Anecdote from the Oxford English Dictionary: a short account of an amusing, interesting, or telling incident or experience, sometimes with implications of unreliability.
Your cat is literally just pawed my whiskey. Your cat just put his paw in my whiskey cup.
That's good.
And just mixed it around for me. You got an anecdote for me?
I don't know. I have to riff off of you.
So you've got these guys building your house, Mr. Yoder. And they're interested in Mennonite guys.
Mennonites, yeah. All Mennonites are named Yoder or Miller or Schmidt. There's only like...
Those are those German names typically? Mennonite?
What is it? They speak German, but German. I think it's from like the Netherlands or something. That sect is from there. I don't know. Anabaptists.
Okay. Yeah, right.
Adult baptism.
Sure.
You got to choose it at, I don't know, 13, 16, 18. I don't know.
All in.
Just the nicest, hardworking, smartest people you ever met. That's unbelievable.
So they're building your house.
Yes.
They're the general contractors for building your house?
Yeah, and most of the tradespeople are too. These aren't
most of their subs are also Mennonite.
Yeah. And these aren't your super orthodox. Like Amish And there's different sects of Amish and Hutterites, Mennonites.
I don't know what Hutterite is.
Another Anabaptist,
Okay.
shunning sect. But, these guys aren't super orthodox. So, they drive Ford pickups and have phones and all that. But they go to the Zion Mennonite church. And
Right.
But, man, they're just honest, hardworking. They're just a delight. And Mr. Yoder's got a couple of boys that are seeking a virtuous mate. No debt, businesses, land, got stuff going on.
How old are they?
They're around their mid-20s. There's
mid to late
there's
20s.
like 3 or 4 of them, the boys, all hardworking, good-looking kids. They've just been a delight. Build great houses. Won't work in town. Like, I guarantee you, if I had tried to get them to contract for this house and was still living in town and having them do it out here for me, they wouldn't have done it. Like, these people are a pain. We're not going to do it. I don't want to argue with the wife about sconces. Yeah, it's been great. They're ahead of schedule. I'm not going to say they're under budget because everything's extraordinary how expensive everything
that's
is.
not really their fault as much as it is.
No, it's not.
It's just
not.
the world we live in. So those guys doing framing the roof today, were those the Yoders or were that somebody else?
No, that's the subcontractors. That's Mr. Smith and his boys, and they're all
they Mennonites as well.
No, those guys are.
Those are the Presbys.
They're heavy duty
Pentecostals.
Pentecostals.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay. Got it.
yeah. Like they'll start speaking in tongues out there.
Will they?
No, they're pretty heavy duty. Yeah. We had a little end times talk on water
Did
break.
you
the
for
other day.
real?
Oh yeah.
And what'd they say?
Oh well, he's like 1,000 years of hell on earth. He's like, we're not getting raptured out of here. We're not getting raptured out of here.
No rapture.
Yeah. He's like, you need to.
I was telling you at dinner, I'm not going to expound on this because
Too late.
you used to give me a hard time about being a Calvinist, which, by the way, I am a Calvinist, but I am fully Reformed, which is a little bit different. So do you know the difference? I mean, I am a 1689 London Baptist Confession Reformed person, which Calvinism is part of that, but it's not all of that. So it's just a piece of that.
All those Proddies that got all this rhetoric, like reformed. It's revolutionary. They didn't reform anything. They rejected everything before them and started over.
First off, that's not entirely fair because you know that Luther didn't want to start over.
But
wanted,
that's not what happened.
No, I know, but that's what he wanted.
And then here we are.
And then I'm not going to expand on. Don't ask me to expand on this. But for you guys that know, for you guys that don't worry about it. But I'm definitely post-mill too. I'm post-millennial. I do not think that all the crazy at the end of the world, I do not think there's going to be like Jesus is going to come back and there's going to be a rapture and like pilots are going to disappear from the airplanes. And then there's going to be 7 years of tribulation and war and earthquakes and famines and then 1,000-year millennial reign. Like, I don't even see how that possibly occurs in scripture so not me. And again, we're trying to stay not religious that much, but if you want to know what, I've had a lot of people actually reach out to me over the years because you gave me a hard time about being Calvinist. So to be clear, I am Calvinist, but I'm actually fully Reformed. And the difference between us, so like Reformed Presbyterians, who would be like the Westminster Confession, is that the primary difference is we would baptize adults and they would baptize children. And I fully understand why they do that. It's not a major disagreement, but it's one of the things we disagree about. I think that they don't believe in transubstantiation. We don't either, but
no,
I think
Presbyterians don't.
I think there's some of that essence of we do take communion every Sunday. We use real wine, all that kind of stuff.
You guys are really doing Lunchables, like snacking. If there's no transubstantiation, it's a LARP.
It's not a LARP.
It's a LARP.
We take it super serious.
Oh, then
I just don't believe I'm crunching up Jesus' bones in my mouth.
Well, that's not what substantiation is.
It's not?
No.
What is it?
Well, Aristotle teaches us that all things have an essence and a substance.
So I think that's a different name. So
but the transubstantiation is related to a change in the
substance.
Is the substance
not the
of
essence.
The thing. Right.
Right. So I can actually get on board with some of the, and I'll screw this up, but some of the denominations believe that the essence of the thing changes. And I don't know that I fully agree, but I definitely don't disagree with that.
You got to go do a crazy dive into Aristotle's metaphysics so you can learn about what he talks about essentials and accidents and the substances of matter.
Sure.
And then when all these people get in their theological bouts, you're like, oh, they're using his language and all his vocabulary.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. So, I don't think anybody thinks that they're like crunching up his bones or whatever, but it's substantially different after the blessing.
Right. Okay.
That's the thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Substantially different. So I do the Online Great Books podcast and people email me and all this, and they're like, hey, will you ever please have Reynolds on and do Grudem's systematic theology for the show.
So for what it's worth, I'm not in on Grudem's systematic theology anymore. Like, I like him and I like the book. I would not agree with, I don't know, 15 or 20% of that book. And so I am.
That's a lot of agreement.
It is a lot of agreement. I mean, I am very pro systematic theology. I do think that I look at scripture first as a primary form of authority for religion or, what you believe. I look at systematic theology second. So you can't pull just scripture out of a specific spot. You've got to see how it lines up with the rest of scripture. And so if there's sort of a verse that doesn't seem like it fits, you got to, well, let's compare it to all the other verses and whatnot. And then I was telling you this at dinner. Then I look at the church fathers and the people who are most respected in theology, and I go, well, what do they believe? And a lot of that is just more of like an appeal to guys that are smarter than me and are smarter than us. And so
after 1580.
No, I mean, I would look at like Augustine and Thomas Aquinas, or both before that, but certainly Luther, Calvin, Zwingli, Spurgeon, those guys as well. Don't I see you smiling. All those guys I respect those tremendously. So yeah, I mean, and those are, but scripture is the ultimate authority, but you get to these places for me, where I'm like, if it doesn't quite line up or doesn't quite make sense or I can't quite figure it out, you look at the systematic theology. I think there is a systematic theology in scripture, and it's sort of like, if this, then this, you get this sort of.
That's so crazy. It's not a syllogism, if thens. It's just.
It is.
It's clearly
okay.
not.
And then church fathers, where you go, like, okay.
If it was, they wouldn't need to expound on it like that. But in Grudem's defense.
Yeah, Grudem,
whatever. I'm in a group that's reading Aquinas's Little Summa Contra Gentiles, which is one of the most wonderful books ever written. Like, whether you care about the subject or not, it's the most elegant, amazing thing. It's just so perfectly done. And he's an Aristotelian. So again, we're in essences and we're substances and we're about being and his metaphysics and all this stuff. So he talks about how the prime mover argument, right? Like, I hit a billiard ball and the billiard ball moves.
Right.
Well, something moved the billiard ball. It was me.
Right.
And then something moved me.
Right.
And then you go all the way back. And if you don't accept there's an infinite regress problem, you have to say, well, something moved everything in the beginning and it does not move itself. Yeah. And he's like, that's the prime mover. That's
the deity.
Well, he didn't even say deity for a while, but he gets there. And he says, well, if there's this thing that moved everything, yet was unmoved by itself, what could that possibly be like? Like, how would we describe it? And it's not the Charlton Heston looking guy in the Sistine Chapel with the beard and the lightning bolts. It's not that at all. But he finally it is if-then statements, logical statements. He proves through like a series of logical proofs that the prime mover, its essence and its totality must be being.
Sure.
Like, its primary characteristic would be being.
Sure.
Now he goes on to say it has several
not just
primary.
Spirit, not just essence, but like
being.
Thing.
It is. Right?
Yeah.
And then at the end of that chapter, he says, and that's what he says when he tells in Genesis, I am
what I am. Right. That's exactly what I thought about.
Yeah.
He tells Abraham Moses when he says Moses.
Because when you read that and you don't have that in your mind, you're like, what are you doing? Like, what are you saying? That's crazy. I am that I am. Yeah. What? Right. Well, he just describes it. And I'm like, I wonder what
all this.
Grudem says.
Yeah.
Grudem. So I looked it up and he came to the same conclusion.
Yeah.
Which pleased me.
Right.
But I read his arguments and I don't know how he got there. If that's the right answer, he got there through revelation, divine revelation, because he didn't prove it.
He didn't get there.
No, it's not systematic. It's not. And I'm not trying to be ugly to him. He got there, but he didn't get there convincingly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in this Summa, the little one, he says, if you're not a believer, you're not going to believe the Bible, so I'm not going to use it.
Right.
It's like, if I convince you, maybe you'll use it later, but I'm not going to do that.
Sure.
So he doesn't use
one of the hardest arguments, by the way. When you talk to somebody, you're trying to establish like what is.
Oh, if you quote scripture at somebody, they're like,
or like ultimate authority or what is truth, and you're just like, it's actually easier to talk to somebody who is whatever. You talk about the Pentecostal guys. Like, can we both agree that scripture is the ultimate authority? Yes. Okay, cool. We can talk about this thing. But you talk to somebody else and they're like, I just think that's an old book that was written by guys that, wasn't really like God's word. And you go, okay, well, we have to go back somewhere and establish what can we agree on that is truth? What can we agree on that is the foundational?
Thomas does it so beautifully. It's amazing. It's amazing.
He's great. One of the first excellent apologetics
The first. He's the one.
That's fine. He's great.
Towering genius. Unbelievable. Like, even if you don't care about this stuff, just like his methods and the elegance is just astounding.
1200? Is that when he was?
Yeah, he died in 1270.
Yeah, that's what I
Wasn't very old.
No. Just missed the Reformation.
He was going to the Council of Nicaea, I think.
I think
one of the big ones
earlier. Yeah, that was.
And was riding a horseback and hit his head on a tree limb, fell off, and died.
That's how he died?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, and so he wrote those two sumai, two giant books, these two giant apologies,
Right.
He says at the beginning of the little one, it's really best if you can have a revelation, but I can't make you do that.
Right.
So
we use pragmatism.
We're just going
logic.
to use rationality, to which all good men assent,
Yeah.
And then later on, I think it's Paul and John come to him in his room. And then he's like, everything I did was straw. It's a waste. Yeah. And then hits his head on a tree. And
how weird. That's strange.
What a guy.
Did you change the subject for a second? Did you ever get COVID? You got COVID?
I might have.
You don't know?
No, I was sick as a dog in October of 2020.
But don't know if it was actually COVID.
No.
Never tested positive.
I never took a test.
Never took a test.
No. Like, why do you take a test? There's no cure. Like, what are we talking about?
Because I want to know.
Oh, well, if I'd have known that.
Well, no. I don't want to know if you tested positive. I don't care. But for me, yeah, I've heard this argument before. Like, I want to know on some level if I have some sort of natural immunity. And some of that is, I got it so early. And then, again, not bragging, probably would have never gotten the shot. But because we wanted to go to Scotland.
Wanted
to.
Like, I'll take the gene therapy. I want to go to Scotch refinery.
Scotch was good. It was good. It was worth it. So.
Yeah, I think I got it in October. My
Of
mother-in-law,
2020.
who's a nurse.
Yeah.
Definitely got it. She had come over for breakfast one day with my wife. I said hi, gave her a hug or something.
Yeah.
And 2 days later, I was sick as a dog, and she tested positive like the day before.
You didn't buy up a bunch of tests. I mean,
No.
we got 25 tests at the house.
No, I didn't buy any.
Yeah. We test our kids and stuff all the time still. We're just like, I just want to know. You don't care.
I don't care.
Like, if you had syphilis, would you want to know? Or the clap, would you just spank your or would you just
Well, there's
wanna
a
know
treatment for that.
right.
Yeah,
but I think there's a part of me I would just like, one, I would want to either A, protect the people that are around me, and B, I would want to know if once I'm through it, that I've got, okay, like I got a magic Superman cape now. I got a little bit of immunity. I mean, again, I know people have had it multiple times, and like those were lesser, obviously, humans than myself.
right.
Because I got it 3 years ago, and I've literally traveled all over the world since then, and I've never even sniffed it since then. So
My oldest one, when they first started hearing about it,
yeah,
they're like, somebody ate a pangolin in like
yeah,
Kyoto. And
yeah. You were like, "Hey, we know a person that got
No,
COVID," and
no,
she was like, "Was it Reynolds?"
Riley was like, no, it was on the news, and Riley's like, Reynolds is going to get that.
Right. Why did you think that? Just because I travel.
I have no idea. But she's like, and then I said, hey, Ross, I just talked to Reynolds. He's in the hospital. He's got COVID. And she's like, I told you.
Yeah, I knew it was coming. I was so sick.
We had sold our house and we were living in a duplex, like an 1,100 square foot
You're like,
duplex.
we got to record right now. Like, I'll record. I'll just turn your phone on. You were like, I'll record from the hospital. Let's
Look at
record from the
breaking news, man.
hospital room. We did it a few days later.
He was on a ventilator. He wouldn't do it.
I was not on a ventilator, but it had pretty bad pneumonia, which I've never had before.
Whatever it was I had, our bedroom was upstairs in this little duplex we'd rented after we sold the house. And there was a laundry basket. I'm like, we did laundry. I'm like, I'll carry this. I couldn't carry the basket up the stairs.
Right.
Yeah. It was,
that was the
I
problem
was
with me.
sick.
I was in the hospital, and I got great because I was the first guy in town. I got the negative pressure room. I got a nurse all to myself. She's in like a hazmat suit. They kept
so
her
hot.
It was they kept her in like a special room that she was, fully isolated, and she was just working with me. And they wouldn't even ask me what I wanted for lunch at the hospital. They would just bring me all the lunches. They would bring me like 8 lunches because they didn't want to come in and even bother me. So they're like, oh, you got a turkey sandwich, and you got soup, and you got, whatever, chicken fried rice, and you got all this. Literally 8 lunches they would give me.
What was all of that? Like that
was
whole
so bizarre.
year.
Well, I mean,
Just this moral
you got to remember that
panic. It
this
was
was
so
like the
weird.
first, yes, but in the first week of March when I got it, it was so early that
It was.
people just didn't know.
But by June,
Oh, everybody knew. It was
what
a
was
disaster.
going on? It's such
Shut
a weird
everything
thing.
down, shut the world down, and it's just a complete.
I'll never understand it.
Yeah.
We lived through it, and it changed my opinion of history. By the way,
Sure, of course.
in American schools, they typically teach kind of two theories of history, like the great man theory and like the conflict theory.
Yep.
Like, the United States, you're going to teach the history of the United States. You teach about George Washington and that tyrant Lincoln, and then like Thomas Edison and Henry Ford, and like the great men, like
Right.
Eli Whitney and the cotton gin, right?
Yeah,
know, it's like, and the other one is like the conflict theory.
Yeah.
1066, 1776, 1861. You teach about wars and conflict.
Yep.
I've always been interested in how history is done.
Sure.
Like, 2020, 2021, historic.
Yep.
Like in a lot of ways. And it's clear to me that we've lived through like a fulcrum in time, like something happened and it pivoted right there. But I'm like, how do you tell that story?
Right.
Like maybe it's conflict, right? The Spanish flu of 1918 might be part of the story.
Sure.
But then I realized, well, people are still just people, right? They're still like having pot roast on Sunday.
Sure.
And, all of history that we're taught might not really even be relevant.
Right.
And not that there aren't lessons
like
to be
how much
learned.
impact did it actually make?
Yeah, you read about the Battle of Hastings in 1066.
Right.
And William the Conqueror kills pathetic Harold.
Right.
Did anybody care in West Anglia?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Great,
I mean, ultimately they did because they ended up being ruled by the French, and now they're
Sure.
Thanks, Harold. But for normal people, life just continues on.
Rachel's grandma is 97 years old, and she's still super sharp mentally. By the way, I hugged her.
Broke her rib.
No, I had COVID. It was 2 days before I officially. So in March of 2020, maybe March 4th, somewhere in there, we had a birthday party for her. She was 95, and I went and gave her a hug. They call her Nanny, and Nanny, great to see you. Happy birthday. Give her a hug. Kind of kissed her on the cheek. Had super contagious COVID at the time.
Slipped her the tongue.
And no, did not slip her the tongue. And of course, once I got it, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to kill the matriarch of the family. His grandpa's been dead for years. It's going to be a bad deal. She was fine. But, she tells a story of her grandpa was the first superintendent of Philadelphia schools. And she tells a story about how she didn't know that the Great Depression existed.
Yeah, she's a civil servant. The check's still cash.
She didn't know that it existed. And so, here in Oklahoma, in the Dust Bowl, like, it was awful.
It was an utter disaster.
It was awful. But for the people who were upper class in the Northeast, like, it just didn't register.
Oklahoma didn't recover from it till the mid 70s. Maybe.
Really?
I think
not
so.
World War II. No,
I don't think so.
Not.
The people will say, well, oil.
Sure.
But maybe kind of. But no, it is devastating.
Yeah. 50 years. 45 years.
I think so.
It's crazy.
What is history? What do these events mean? There's stuff in Ukraine and all that stuff. And here I am.
Yep.
Now what? Like,
yep.
Right
now, I don't think it's affected anybody for the most part. I mean, again, the inflation and the rising gas prices is not primarily an effect from the war between Russia and Ukraine. It's an effect from printing $5 trillion in extra money that, and
more than that. Milton Friedman tells us that inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. It's about quantity of money.
That's right.
Sometimes prices go up.
However, Ukraine and Russia could turn into a major problem, obviously.
It is.
And so, it's not yet. Well, you think it is now? Here's what I would say. And so, again, I trust you to have even better insight in this than I do, but I don't know that the war could have been avoided, but we never tried, right? No. So the breaking point for Russia was Ukraine can't join NATO. That's the major red flag. And if we and NATO had come out and said, hey, we will not let Ukraine join NATO for the next decade, that is completely off the table, I think the war doesn't occur. Now, it might have because Putin's nuts, right? And he's a dictator and who knows what he does. But like, at least we don't even know. So they use that to say like, well, if you're going to let Ukraine join NATO, that's a threat to our security and we got a problem. Now, the problem is that, so now we got Ukraine and Russia in a war, but as long as the other NATO countries continue to ally with Ukraine, if potentially Ukraine becomes part of NATO or at least an ally of NATO, and then, or if Poland or another country in NATO decides to join Ukraine in the war, we're in a war with Russia. Like now we're in World War III. And so the idea of diplomacy that I think occurred with George Herbert Walker Bush, Clinton, with those presidents, and ended with W, right? Like in W, like I'd love to hang out with W and ride a truck and go on a farm. But like that guy in Rumsfeld just wanted to drop bombs on everybody. We got a problem with that, right? And that's continued through like whether you're Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter. That's occurred through the last 4 presidents. Like we have a massive problem if Lithuania, if Poland, if somebody decides, okay, this is it. You've crossed the line, Russia. We're joining Ukraine in this war. Like now NATO's in the war. Now we're part of NATO. We're in a war. We're in World War III. It's a major problem.
Yeah, I think that you have to be careful about thinking about it in terms of these sort of legalistic ways. Like if they sign the documents to become a member of NATO, then blah, 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 blah.
Right.
The opponents may not see that as a trigger condition. They're like, oh, Poland is sending ammunition. These other people are sending military advisors. Sure. This is an overt act of war.
That alone may be enough.
That might be enough.
Yeah, sure.
You know,
agreed.
You know, you're at a bar and you think this guy's going to hit you. You're going to hit him first. Like, right. I'm going to hit him first. I'm going to give him a chance to give me brain damage.
Sure.
You know, so it's super, super, super precarious.
Sure.
Yeah. But like, let's say it all sparks off. Everybody's still got to have pot roast on Sunday or whatever
Sure.
it is they can eat. And, you know, life goes on. And it's been really interesting to watch what was clearly history being made.
Sure.